in a way that we know is going to make the game better.
That fat, bald British cunt.
They must be desperate to give Preach Alpha.
And 8 years just won't matter. We're not making an amazing game.
Preach can piss off back to the maelstrom.
It is, male season what drives your character in expansion. That is not the card.
You literally quit WoW. Nobody cares about
Sure, people like solving things like code and just settle through accounts. What are other things that you want channels to do?
knowing about MMOs, just like saying,
Ladies and gentlemen, after 12 months of not looking at World of Warcraft, we are back. And here is the reason why. They have promised to change a lot of the reasons that I and many others decided to leave. They have big claims out there, at least Ian has and some of the other devs, about how we're not going to be roped into mandatory stuff. They're not going to resent the player's time, as I put it, and we should have a lot of things to look forward to. So it's worth taking a look. I had a wonderful conversation with Blizzard leading into this about rebuilding bridges, looking to get things back on track, and trying to repair that damage that happened over BFA and Shadowlands. So, let's jump into it. I've been playing this slice of the alpha, and alpha will be releasing in slices if you're not aware. They'll test things 1 week and then they'll get rid of that and test something else. So you should look forward to a video from us once a week until either we are fully engaged and enjoying it or not, in which case the videos will probably stop. So let's jump into this one. I'm going to start with our brand new race, the Dracthyr. The Dracthyr. So this slice of the alpha had the Dracthyr starting zone, and of course we've got both specs and their talent trees. DPS spec, Devastation, and our healer spec, Preservation. That is what we're going to be playing with, and I have to say, I'm going to start on a high note here, big time. Preservation Evoker. Whew, yes. Yes! This is one of the most exciting new healers that I've played in a long time. This is right up there with the first time Mistweaver came into the game with its very unique playstyle. Brought something new to the table. And what they're looking to bring here is kind of a similar style to a hybrid between Discipline and a straight up throughput healer in its own unique way. I'm going to be talking about 3 different talent setups that I tried throughout this alpha slice. I'm going to be talking about Preservation Green, Preservation Bronze, and Preservation Red. That is, of course, corresponding to the relevant Dragonflights. Let's start with Bronze. This was my favorite. One of the big heavy hitter spells here that really defines the entire Preservation playstyle is Echo. And I love this spell so much. It's amazing. What does it do? Really simple, really. It's the cost of the new rune system that you have with the Dracthyr Evoker, and it duplicates the next healing spell you do. So what you can do is completely wide open to you. You can put echoes on multiple people and then say, oh, we've got a damage over time aspect coming. And then you throw out a heal over time, and all those people that had echo also get that heal over time. You can proc it to get some free ones, to get lots and lots of them out. If your group's about to be hit heavy in the face like you would with a Disc Priest, where you set everything up with those radiances and you get ready for that big damage, what you can do with your Preservation Evoker is put out a number of echoes and then fire off your big single target healing spell, and it will duplicate to all those people and put out this massive amount of raw burst energy. And they use this echo in the Bronze tree because it's about time. Similarly is their big raid cooldown, Rewind. Now, how it's practically going to use is up in the air a little bit, but I can say one thing, it is really fun in dungeons because it rewinds time, which means you can pop it after the damage has happened. So many raid cooldowns are involving like getting the shields down, getting people prepared for that big incoming damage. Rewind is similar to Revival, in fact that it boosts up just raw HP, but it actually is based on the amount of damage people took during that time window. It's about 5 to 7 seconds, and then it'll start rewinding time for those people. You can actually see the health bars go kaboom down to the floor, and then it's their health just tops back up, and it's super, super fun. My main focus tree, like I said, was Bronze. Messing around with time, slowing down time, preventing things, looking forward to damage coming, and then rewinding the time back for them. There's actually a single target heal here called, I think it's called Renewing Blaze, where you can know you're about to take massive damage, and it will rewind time while you're taking it and heal you back up instead of damaging you. This is fantastic. There are so many occasions as a healer, especially in World of Warcraft, where your health has been plummeted to the floor, but you look around you and you see all these people who are struggling and need some help, But there's a self-sacrifice style of being a healer. I know not with everybody, but there is, where you're like, I need to heal the tank and the other DPS before I heal myself. By having this preemptive button that you can press before the damage, you actually get to heal yourself back up passively, because you activate the ability, while dealing with the rest of the party. And even through the simple, normal, and heroic dungeons we did, I found this absolutely incredible. The other talent setup I tried was green. Green is more throughput healing. Now, they do use a mix of both spells. That is the nature of the talent tree, is you start at the top where you'll pick up a bit of both, then you deviate down towards the bottom. So when I went full green, much more throughput style, something you'd be very familiar with if you played Resto Druid or you've played Holy Priest, for example, where you've got more of a straight healing output style of play. This was also super fun. One thing I truly enjoy, and remember this for when we get to the Devastation Evoker, is the Dream Breath combos and Spirit Bloom combos, because they put out such massive amounts of healing, and they're channeled spells. You'll be aware of the new channeling system that's come into the game. Now, personally, not sure if I'm a fan of it yet. What I will say is in the options menu, you have the option to press the button to get it channeling, and then press again to release the channel. I found this so much more intuitive than actually physically holding the button down. It's something you never do in World of Warcraft, and my World of Warcraft muscle memory was all over the place, remembering to like stop and then start casting. Even with hover, which does allow you to cast on the move, you can't do your channeled spells, at least not now. So I found this way more useful. But the satisfying buildup of the boom, and then you unleash all this green justice across all your friends, really liked it. The third spec I played with, which again was fully complementary and totally enjoyed this, was what I would call the red preservation. So red is more DPS focused, which is your fire spells, right? This allowed me to constantly DPS, chain my fire breaths, chain all these living flames, chain all these spells, and it generated healing procs, very similar to what you'll have seen with fist weaving monks, holy paladins, all that kind of stuff, where you're actively DPSing to generate procs to throw out instant heals on other people and make that work. In a dungeon where you know what's going on and you've got a controlled group that's aware of avoidable damage and dealing with mechanics properly, this allowed you to essentially fill that role as an extra DPSer and will come in really strong in Mythic Plus in the future. Overall, my favorite thing that I found about the Evoker was preservation. Love this thing, really cool. Let's talk about Devastation. Okay, so on the DPS side of things, the story is not quite as rosy for me, unfortunately. I'm obviously going to be comparing this to things like Demon Hunter when it came into the game, and when Monk came into the game with Windwalker. And you'll remember the first time we saw I-Beam, the first time we saw a Demon Hunter charging into demon mode. The gameplay was very simple and still is, but it was still cool to be a giant demon. And similarly with the Monk, you were backflipping, you were spinning crane kicking, you were doing 1,000 fists at once, you were diving across the room and landing and doing all that kind of stuff. And the Devastation Evoker, I mean, it's fine. It's okay. That's what I would say about it. It's not terrible by any means. It's not even close to that. It's just not... It didn't blow my skirt up, guys. That's the only problem with it. I tried multiple specs with this, same as the Preservation Evoker. What I found was it's really lacking that major signature ability that you love pressing. The closest thing they have is Deep Breath. Deep Breath is very cool. And it's the one you'll have seen in the cutscene, where you leap into the air and you sort of shatter the floor as you move across. It is cool. But it doesn't really fit into the playstyle. It's not really adjusted by anything. It's just this button that you have that's very cool. It's just like the extra very cool button, and it's on a 2-minute cooldown, so you don't really press it a lot anyway. The rest of the stuff really comes down to red magic and blue magic. Now, if you've played a mage or a warlock for a while, or some experience in those, you're going to be able to pick up the Devastation Evoker pretty quickly. They're not complicated by any means, at least not now. You find that the blue mage is very, very similar to how arcane mages play and have played for a few years, and red is kind of like an okay fire mage before it had all its bells and whistles put on. That's how I felt about it. I also felt their spells, especially the red spells, the fire spells, were a little on the weak side. When I think about a dragon breathing fire that has a build-up to it, I'm obviously thinking about Smough or any of those kind of dragons where, you know, thunderous fire. Fire breath goes whoop, 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 whoop. It's more like a fire cough. It can be adjusted. I'm not talking about the damage it does, and I never am in any of these videos because that'll change over the course of the design process. What I'm talking about is how it feels to press, and it feels like a fire cough more than anything, a fire sputter. and a lot of your rotation, if you're playing the red side of Devastation, really revolves around it. So I really like a bigger sound, a bit more of an impactful feel, especially as it's got that big build-up of the channel to unleash it, and certainly how thin that cone is. Regularly, if you don't know your tank is stopping, you are stood on the spot because you can't move, and you're doing this constantly, just trying to get all the mobs in this very thin cone. It needs a little bit of work, in my opinion. If they want it to stand out and feel new, feel fresh, it doesn't quite feel that way for me right now. Generally, when you go red or blue, you only have sort of 3 buttons that you're pressing regularly, and they kind of do similar things. So you'll have like Living Flame, Fire Breath, Pyre, Firestorm. And that's it. And you just kind of keep 2 on cooldown while you cycle through the others. And the same with blue. You have some debuffs to manage, and then you throw it out again. Again, it's fine, all right? It's fine. It's not terrible. It's just when a new spec comes into the game, I look at something like Preservation, I'm like, holy crap, you kind of changed the game with this. And I look at Evoker, it's like, you kind of did this before a few times. So that's how I feel about those things. Let's talk about the starting area then. So starting area story-wise, crisp. Absolutely crisp. There's actually some really good setup here for some new characters that I hope are going to come back and be really reintroduced, because they set them up very, very well for really good, interesting characters. And one thing World of Warcraft surely needs is some new, fresh blood to make that stuff work, right? One thing I'll say is like 2 things. The gameplay is very, very slow. Now, let's bear in mind here, in order to play a Dracthyr, you need to type into the game that you are advanced. You're an advanced player. But then the gameplay they give you is not even remotely close to being advanced at all. It's all stuff you've seen before. Besides the new channeling mechanic, that's kind of it. Everything else kind of fits into place. What I would say is they have these little urns around the place, which constantly reset the cooldowns of your spells. I would move Fire Breath. As I already explained earlier, I don't really care for Fire Breath. It feels a bit flimsy. But Deep Breath is awesome. Deep Breath is always cool to press. They give you Fire Breath early, mainly because it's a channeled spell, because they're like, oh, let's introduce it to channeling. I get that. Deep Breath is way more fun to press, and the Dracthyr at the start, when it's learning its base spells, doesn't feel very fun. It feels very, very slow, very stunted. Nearly every spell you get is a casted or channeled spell, besides your instant cast cleave ability, which you will use in AoE. It just feels a little, okay, can we get going now? Because you want to, the gameplay doesn't grab you by the balls. That's what I'm trying to say. The gameplay does not grab you by the balls. A fix could be swap Fire Breath for Deep Breath in terms of the order you get them in those zones, and allow these urns to reset the cooldown on Deep Breath. Because Deep Breath is way more satisfying to press. It's way more fun. Would love to have pressed it way more times during that starting zone. Another thing we should talk about is Soar, the Dracthyr racial. The ability to soar above the skies and be a dragon. It is by far the most fun spell they've introduced in years. It is incredible. It's so good. And you get nowhere near enough times to do it during the starting zone, and it should be one of the highlights of the starting zone. What I would gladly like to see, because it has a 5-minute cooldown, is to say, it's a fantasy game, right? So you can make up anything, is that these Dracthyr creches that they have are built in an area where the winds are favorable for soaring. So it has a 2-minute cooldown. Because what you often find when you're wandering around this zone, or at least this is what I found, is that you want to go soaring from quest to quest because it's really cool and it's brand new and it's super fun. But that 5-minute cooldown means if it's come back off cooldown, after you've kind of jogged your way to where you need to be, is that you kind of want to hold it because you've probably got a very long journey coming up, and you do. And several times I found myself getting into this awful habit of like, oh, I need to go across the map. I might as well wait another minute or so to soar because that's way more fun and quicker. Will we hit the tree if we soar from here? I think we're fine. Why did it cancel me? Is this absolutely not the way? Somebody else is stuck here too. And you just sort of AFK until that time. Or you just end up jogging your ass over to wherever you need to be. It's something that should be allowed to be made fun, have fun with. I would second this up by saying they have some treasures and rares and things hidden in only Soar accessible places. And people want to investigate, they want to see, they want to stick their toes in and see what's going on. So I would really reduce the cooldown of Soar in that zone, and it would add a lot more fun and dragon-style gameplay to that zone, and make it much more enjoyable, in my opinion. Those are the things. Other than that, the starting zone is great. Good introduction to the characters, good introduction to the backstory that's happening with the Dracthyr, really interesting new characters coming into it. Gameplay is a little slow, gets better towards 60. That's why I would only swap Fire Breath and Deep Breath in terms of when you get them, because you get them all after about half an hour, 40 minutes, and then you will have everything and you can start messing around a lot more before you get your talents and really start specializing. Those are the things I would like to see with that. Moving on from this though, it is time to look at our professions. A brand new profession system is coming to the game, so let's go. Now, I know many of you are probably really excited about the profession system. I am too, and to anybody who suspected this, it's nothing like Final Fantasy XIV. It's not as involved in that at all. In fact, surprisingly, it's nowhere near as mechanically different as some of you probably suspect it's going to be. If you've ever crafted anything in World of Warcraft before, you're going to know this system hands down. It's very, very simple. It's usual stuff. Now, we do have the new mixes of quality of ore, so between 1 and 3, and we have the mix of quality of items where they can somewhat proc to be higher quality by a couple of item levels, and that goes up by like 5 different levels, so you can have a 10 item level difference between one person crafting one item and one person crafting another. Now, don't despair. No despair. We do have the new talent system. Now, this is where this thing gets interesting. Is the talent system something complicated? No, it's not. In fact, its rewards are pretty self-explanatory. You're going to get extra levels in terms of how you craft axes. You're going to make better quality axes. You're going to get more chances to proc better quality axes, right? If you go into axe specialization. Sometimes when you craft, you'll get some of your resources back. Sometimes with certain materials, you might multi-strike them. So with potions, for example, you generate more potions, just like we've seen back in the Burning Crusade. Nothing particularly new here. And again, don't despair. That's not the purpose of this system. While I would have certainly liked them to have gone a bit deeper in the actual crafting of things rather than this simple gather resources, press craft, and whatever pops out is pops out. This whole system for me is actually Blizzard trying to do a bit of social engineering in a good way. This is something we've talked a lot about in Final Fantasy XIV, is they do a lot of rewarding you for doing things that would be in the best interests of the whole community, either by spectating people, helping out noobs, taking your time in dungeons. Things like that will reward you with better things, and it fosters a more positive community. Now, one thing that's definitely disappeared from World of Warcraft over the years is the idea that you are your character's name. In fact, many of you, or nearly all of you listening to this, will have been referred to as mage, rogue, paladin, warrior. Your name very rarely gets used. There's been a very clear disconnect where the community kind of looks at others players, certainly in Mythic Plus and things like that, as NPCs who are there to take them to the end of the dungeon in a polite and nice way, and hopefully you will get some reward out of it, but they're faceless. They don't count. And Blizzard wants to rein that back in. Understandably so, because MMOs are built on community. They're built on the players themselves. You can't produce enough content to satiate everybody playing a solo player experience. It's just not going to happen. This is where they're coming in with professions. From what I can tell, and this remains to be proven, but it clearly seems to be going in that direction. If you wanted to, you can in fact learn every single specialization that exists within your chosen profession. If you want to be a master axesmith, macesmith, swordsmith, two-hander, shieldsmith, armorsmith, bootsmith, bracersmith, glovesmith, chestsmith, shouldersmith, and all the tools and funky toys that come with it, you can do that. But it's going to take you until you die. And that's what they're aiming for to happen here, because they don't want you really to do that until probably very, very late in the game if you dedicate your entire soul, life, and body to achieving that goal. Instead, you're going to have to be a bit picky about what you specialize in. And that's going to mean somebody else is going to specialize in a different direction. And that also means that somebody else is going to specialize in a different direction. And it all comes down to this blacksmith's knowledge, alchemist knowledge, this extra resource that is separate from the usual profession levels that you guys have known and loved for a long time. How quickly do you get this resource? Don't know. Right now in the alpha, you get a magic book from an NPC that just gives you the knowledge so you can test out what the results are going to be of this. In fact, professions are unfinished in general. Lots of things aren't working, but the basics are there. What they want to have happen is this. They really want you, and they're doing this by time gating some of the soul-bound resources that you need to craft things. So you'll level to about 50, like halfway through. But then you're going to hit a wall in terms of available recipes that aren't really going to level you up too much. What you then need to start crafting are the things that require quite rare resources. Often, resources that are owned by another person. This is where your work orders come in, right? Because what they actually want to have happen is they want people to say, I want to craft this, and remember, this now goes up to mythic quality. I want somebody to craft my brand new gloves. They're BIS, everybody says they're amazing, I want them to happen. And I now have my resource. That's the soul-bound resource that only I can get, and they're going to drip feed these out the community because they don't want everybody to just craft mythic gear in day one, duh. So this will take weeks until you get one of these resources. And now in that meantime, similar to what you do in the Burning Crusade, is you go out and farm the other resources if you wanted to, so you can have your gloves crafted. Then you're going to go to the auction house, and then you're going to put it out there to say, I want this pair of gloves, I want them to be this quality, I will tip you this much, and here's the materials, and you're going to send it out. They then want the crafters, who are now essentially unable to level like normal without being able to craft these things, to go and get your work orders so they can level up and focus. And whoever wants to do the best deal will level up a bit more, a bit quicker, will specialize a bit better, will be the friendly person, will be the person who whispers the person who wants it crafting, saying, I'll do that for free. And I can see in the early days, a lot of this happening for the more shrewd businessmen out there, is they'll be the ones to say, you know what, I've got lots of this ore, don't need to go and farm it. I'll craft them for you, because it's the only way for them to get levels and vis-a-vis their professional knowledge. And they're the ones who are going to specialize in it. But it's going to be so hard to do that. Don't worry, because I'm sure you're hearing me say, oh, so the rich just get richer. No, because the way this knowledge works means they'll have to go down one path, where another guy's going to go down a different path, another guy's going to go down a different path, and then they'll be head to head. And what you're building here, if you're not sure what it sounds like, is a community. It's a community of people who you now know and recognize. And once you can build your really good mythic stuff, you're going to want to have that be the best quality it can be. You got to work out on getting your resources. You're then going to seek out individuals. You're going to seek out named individuals to provide this craft for you because you know they can do it. If I'm going to craft my big two-handed sword, I'm going to go to the best goddamn swordsmith I can find, like you would in a real fantasy world. You read Lord of the Rings, you read Game of Thrones, or whatever it is like that, you're looking for the best of the best blacksmith. The same you find in the Dark Souls games. You look for them expertise-driven specialists to craft these things for you. If you're dumb, you can just throw it up on a work order and say, anybody craft me whatever, but it's kind of a waste of your resources to do that, right? You don't want that to happen. What you want is these people to go out and work at it. And I can fully see, and I think this is fully the intention of Blizzard, that the new profession system, mechanically simple, but it's designed to weave and stitch communities together, and this will become the full end game of some players, and that's great. Because one thing World of Warcraft has lacked for a while is a place for the Samwell Tarleys. A place for the guys who aren't combat driven, they don't care about logs, they don't care about whether or not their name's highest on the DPS meter, but they want to be a part of the world. They want to be a part of the war effort, they want to be a part of the fight, and they can do it via this way, and it should be very exciting. Another way they're doing this is they're crafting, or they've put items that can be crafted that are utilized by other professions. There's some basic stuff, right? Blacksmiths are going to craft your new mining pickaxe, for example, and things like that. That's fine. But what we saw as we capped out our professions is they have some end game items that are on daily limits, so you can't craft too many of them. But if you mix them with somebody else, then you get some very good results. Such things as allowing, if you're going to craft feasts, for example, you might want to get some things for the alchemists that make it so your feast now persists through death. So if you're being a bit stupid about it and you're just a trained cook, sure, you can go ahead and make feasts or cauldrons or whatever, like great, and you drop one every time they die. But if you mix with the alchemist team and you work together, what you now have is the combination to make ones where you use 1/10 of the amount that you were going to use, especially on progression and things like that. And they need more of that. Right now there's a little bit of that, as I just explained, but it needs more. There needs to be more cross-pollination across the professions so that people are actively seeking other people out. Now, not to be big-headed about this, but we kind of designed this a long time ago here internally with a document that we were going to present to Blizzard, but we went a little bit further with it, so stay tuned for that, because I know Chris has been badgering me for years to release that and talk about it, so we're probably going to do it now, as we're kind of a lot of the way there, so we'll see how it goes. Let's talk about the new dungeons. So, Blizzard gave 2 dungeons to this week's alpha slice, and of course I did them all on tank, healing, and DPS. We only have access to normal and heroic, and I know many people look to dungeons these days in World of Warcraft with Mythic Plus in mind, and that's something we can't do because Mythic 0 or Plus is not available for these dungeons, so I have to look at them from normal and heroic. The sad part about that is, neither in normal and heroic did any of the bosses really do anything. Sometimes they died before they could pull off their main mechanic. That's just the nature of lower level dungeons, unfortunately. They've kind of been left in this weird place where they're kind of for leveling, and then there's this weird heroic step which you kind of briefly step in, and then you move past very quickly once you hit Mythic 0. And some people skip it entirely these days and don't bother with it. So let's talk about some other things then. First, the look and theme of them. So we have Neltharus, which is more volcanic, dragon-y type feel to it. And we have the new revamped Uldaman from all the way back in vanilla. So we'll start with Neltharus. Neltharus is fine. In fact, I would say that about both of these. They're fine. What I didn't see in either dungeon, actually, was a really epic, interesting moment. I didn't see something that was like, God, that's cool. You know, nothing silly like Musela standing up at the end of the other side and going through something silly like Mr. Turn Aside. I might not enjoy the little squeaky fairy, but it was memorable to be in there while that was happening. Nothing like that in either of them. Very straightforward, very to the point, very practical is how I would describe them. Neltharus in particular had no real change in scenery, which I really, really missed. This was something that I very much enjoyed about World of Warcraft, is that they try and give some different layouts and environments into their dungeons sometimes. So you would proceed through and things would change. But this has gone away from that for the last few years. And Neltharus is very much in that vein. The mobs are practically identical from start to finish. They have different names and do slightly different mechanics, which again in the Mythic Plus side is more interesting. But from a visual standpoint of being in there, it's like, okay. It's kind of the same thing all the way. The most standout boss for me in there was actually the Forge Master. He has a very intimidating room. You can hear that clink clink on the anvil as you're running towards him. He's got some cool mechanics which are, blowing you away, doing relatively severe damage for a heroic. Nothing that you can't out heal, but you can certainly die there if you're being a bit lazy. And the last boss potentially is really cool. Again, waiting for Mythic on this, as it has this mechanic where he'll put a shield over himself and then you have to run around and get treasures. Now, I've done this boss about 6 times now and always got the exact same treasure, even when I'm clicking in different places, which just reduces his absorb shield so it goes away. So you click the treasure. I was hoping for something a bit more like Opulence, where there was a huge variety of things depending on your class and spec, and you could maybe be a bit picky and choosy, but as it's only the last boss, it's kind of wasted because you finish the last boss. The boss is already at half health essentially by the time he puts his shield up, at least in heroic, so it wouldn't last very long. I can see why they didn't go for that variety, but it just kind of spoils the broth a little bit. If you could do that boss earlier in the dungeon and then pick up some cool buffs that you could maybe maintain for the remainder of the dungeon, like we've seen in other areas of the game, that might be something really interesting. That might be something really fun, but as it's the last boss, even if it did do that, you wouldn't get to utilize it for very long anyway, unless you tried to. I don't even think you can go to the last boss early. I haven't tried that, so that might be a case. But either way, Neltharus was all right. It was okay. It's passable as a dungeon. Like, I would rate both these dungeons about a 5 or 6. Let's move on to Uldaman then. Same complaints on the negative side. It's nothing really epic happened, and it really opened my eyes, as one of the earliest things I experienced in World of Warcraft was Uldaman, and running into Arcadis at the end was really a cool moment. You have this giant statued creature that you knew was going to break loose and shatter, and back in the day at least, it was kind of a big deal as to, and then he's loose, it's, I am Arcadis, and then he comes for you. The new Uldaman doesn't have anything like that, which is really sad, because that was really cool. And in fact, the original vanilla version for me has more of an epic, grandiose moment. And certainly, we can also think about the Maiden being released in the original Uldaman. Is you plant the staff, and the beam shoots in, and the door lights up, and it opens up, and the Maiden comes crashing through. That was great. The new version for the modern era doesn't have any of that stuff at all. And I was like, oh, bummer. This was kind of more fun 15 years ago. You see what I'm saying? Like, the dungeon is fine. It's very linear. It's just one corridor all the way to the end. It does have some mob variety, but it's the mob variety you essentially got in vanilla, and mixed in with some Dragonflights, which is cool. You got some infinite Dragonflight in there, which was nice. But other than that, yeah, nothing stand out really. Bosses that do similar stuff to what we've seen in the past. Nothing really epic or interesting happens. The last boss basically just does area denial, and it's also based on time. Like I said, the infinite Dragonflight is in there. So there's this element of messing with time in there, but I then think about End Time, which was all the way back in Wrath of the Lich King, which had way more stuff going on in it than this does. And I'm really curious as to why that's disappeared, that kind of stuff. If you remember the End Time final dragon, you could rewind time, get all your cooldowns back, and you could have kind of a lot of fun just blasting and blasting, which was unusual and interesting and gave a nice twist and flavor, especially if you knew how to optimize it. And you kind of wanted to do that boss more times so you could optimize it and have combustion up permanently and things like that. Nothing like that in here. Very simple stuff. Looking forward to Mythic to hopefully see that there's something in there. But I would give both these dungeons like a 5 or a 6. They're passable. They're fine. Nothing that made me go, okay. And, nothing that made me go, whoa, this is awesome. I didn't have that Dead Mines moment of shattering the door and seeing that boat in that giant cavern and things like that we had in other dungeons throughout the years. So was looking forward to that. Didn't quite happen. So that's the end of this slice of the alpha for me right now. So far, so good. Blizzard sticking to the true word that they said about how they're treating the players. We'll look forward to the next slice to see what's in there, and hopefully nothing in there that would turn me away from having a look at the Dragonflight alpha. So I hope you enjoyed that, guys, and I'll see you again. Bye, everybody.